Imagine receiving a call from an unknown number, but the person on the other end knows everything about you. Where you are, what you're wearing, even what you just said minutes ago. This is the real experience of 3 families in Washington State who lived through a terrifying phone stalking nightmare. By the end of this video, you will be left thinking about the scary things happening in our world. Just before we go into the details of this story, I need you to understand that we have put a lot of work into researching, scripting, and editing this video for your consumption. And the only gift we need from you in return is your subscription to this channel. If you've already done that, thank you very much. You are the reason why we still work very hard on this channel. Now, let's get cracking. 2007, a quiet suburban town in Faircrest, Washington. 3 families living ordinary lives had no idea that their phones, devices meant to keep them connected and safe, would soon become tools of fear and control. The 𝐒𝐿𝐴𝐿 dolls, the Prices, the McKays, 3 households, all targeted by an unknown force. It all started with 16-year-old Courtney 𝐒𝐿𝐴𝐿 doll. One day, her friends started receiving strange text messages from her number. But the messages weren't normal conversations. They were random, short, and completely out of character. One of them simply read, "gay." At first, her friends thought she was playing a joke. They responded, asking her what she meant. But Courtney had no idea what they were talking about. She hadn't sent anything. She checked her phone. There were no outgoing messages. Then, the strange activity escalated. Her ringtone changed by itself. Her phone would turn on and off without her touching it. At first, her family thought it was just a glitch, a harmless technical issue. Phones could act up sometimes. Maybe it was a virus, or maybe Courtney had accidentally changed her settings. But then it started happening to others, neighbors, friends, even her own parents. And soon the phone calls began, anonymous, at all hours of the night. And they were about to discover this was only the beginning. The phone calls started slowly. At first, they were just a nuisance, late-night rings from an unknown number. Then the calls became more frequent. Every night, every morning, at all hours of the day, the families would pick up, but no one would answer, just silence. When a voice finally did come through, it was distorted, scratchy, almost inhuman, and it had a message. "We're going to kill you. We hate you. We're watching." The caller never identified themselves. The only thing the families ever saw on the screen was one word: restricted. Terrified, they contacted the police. But when the investigators traced the source of the calls, they found something impossible. The calls weren't coming from an outside number. They were coming from inside the victim's own phones, even when the devices were powered off, even when the batteries were removed. Whoever or whatever was behind this wasn't just calling, they were listening, watching. The families soon realized the caller wasn't making empty threats. They knew things they shouldn't know, what people were wearing, where they were standing in their own homes, what they had just said seconds before. One evening, Andrea McKay was in her kitchen slicing limes. Her phone buzzed. A new message: "I prefer lemons." She froze, her hands shaking. How could they know? Fear spread like wildfire. Could it be a neighbor? Someone watching from the windows? Or worse, someone inside the house? The Faircrest Police Department launched an investigation. They searched for leads, questioned neighbors, looked into every possible suspect, but they found nothing. The phone company, Sprint, was just as baffled. A spokesperson denied any knowledge of hacking technology that could control phones this way, but not everyone agreed. Electronic surveillance expert James Atkinson had a terrifying warning. Cell phones, he explained, could be remotely controlled. Cameras could be activated without permission. Calls could be placed, messages could be sent. And most law enforcement officers had no idea how to stop it. The families were running out of options. If the police couldn't help, if the phone company had no answers, then who or what was behind this, and just how far would they go? The families tried everything to make the calls stop. They changed their phone numbers. They got new phones. They even switched service providers. But nothing worked. The calls continued. The threats escalated. Even their landlines, old-fashioned home phones that weren't supposed to be hackable, started ringing with the same distorted voice. No matter what they did, restricted always found them. Then, something happened that made it clear this wasn't just someone playing a game. One afternoon, the Kuykendalls met with the police to discuss the case. They sat in a small room at the station, speaking in hushed voices. For a moment they felt a sense of relief. They were surrounded by law enforcement. They were safe. But when they returned home, they saw a new voicemail waiting for them. They pressed play. It was a recording of their exact conversation with the police, word for word. Somehow, the stalker had been listening the entire time. The fear that had been simmering in the background exploded into full-blown paranoia. No one was safe. No one could be trusted. And worst of all, what if it was someone they knew? The families started looking at each other differently. Parents questioned their children. Friends questioned each other. Even the police weren't sure what to believe. Could it all be an elaborate hoax? Was someone inside the group orchestrating the entire thing? If so, how were they pulling it off? The victims' lives were unraveling. Friends distanced themselves. Neighbors stopped answering their doors. Everyone was afraid. The calls weren't just a nuisance anymore. They were destroying lives. And no matter how much the families begged for answers, there were none. And then it stopped. Without warning, without explanation. After 4 months of relentless harassment, the calls, the messages, the threats, everything just ended. The phones went silent. No more distorted voices in the middle of the night. No more threats. No more proof that someone somewhere was watching. The families waited. Days passed, then weeks, then months. Still, nothing. Had the stalker finally lost interest? Had they moved on to another target? Or was something else at play? Rumors began to spread. Some claimed the FBI had quietly stepped in, forcing the stalker to stop. But there was never any official confirmation. No arrests, no suspects, no leads. The case simply faded away. But the questions never did. Who had been behind the calls? Was it a hacker with advanced skills? A former friend with a grudge? Or someone much closer? Someone inside the victims' own homes? And if this could happen to them, could it happen to someone else? Our world is more connected than ever. Our phones, our homes, our lives, constantly linked to invisible networks we can't see. We trust technology to keep us safe. But what happens when that same technology turns against us? The phone stalker was never caught. And if they were never caught, what's stopping them from doing it again? The calls may have stopped, but the mystery remains. Who or what was behind the terror that haunted these families for months. Many theories exist. Some seem plausible, others impossible, but none have ever been proven. Let's examine the possibilities. Was this all an elaborate act of revenge? Some believe the stalker was someone from Courtney Kuykendall's past. A jealous friend, a bitter ex, a classmate with something to prove. The harassment seemed personal. It started with Courtney's phone. It targeted those closest to her, her family, her friends, even her neighbors. Could this have been the work of someone with advanced technical skills? Someone who wanted to destroy her life? If so, why? And how did they pull it off? Because no matter how much they hated Courtney, a personal vendetta alone wouldn't explain the level of control the stalker had. Technology was advancing fast in 2007. Hackers were finding new ways to exploit weaknesses in everyday devices. Surveillance experts confirmed that cell phones could be hijacked, used as listening devices, tracking tools, even remote cameras. Spyware could be installed without the owner ever knowing. But even by those standards, this case was extreme. The stalker wasn't just listening, they were controlling. Phones turned on and off at will. Calls were made from devices that weren't even in use. Even landlines were affected. If this was hacking, it was beyond anything most experts had ever seen, which raises another disturbing question. What if the stalker wasn't working alone? The calls were too precise, the information too specific. The stalker knew exactly where the families were at all times. They knew what they were wearing. They knew private conversations. They even knew the passcodes to newly installed security systems. Was it possible the stalker was someone inside their own homes? A neighbor, a relative, a close friend, someone they trusted, someone who watched as the fear grew, who enjoyed seeing them spiral into paranoia. If true, this would be the most terrifying theory of all, because it would mean that while they searched for a faceless enemy, the real threat had been standing right beside them the entire time. And then there's the theory no one wants to consider. What if this wasn't just a hacker? What if the families had been targeted by something bigger? Rumors spread that the FBI had been quietly monitoring the case, that they had stepped in and, without explanation, the calls had stopped. But if that were true, why? Did the stalker get scared and disappear? Or was there something more disturbing at play? Was this an experiment? A test of surveillance technology? A demonstration of just how easy it is to invade someone's life? If so, the implications are terrifying, because if someone, somewhere, had the ability to do this in 2007, what could they do now? The truth remains unknown. The phone stalker was never caught. No arrests, no suspects, no answers. And that means whoever did this may still be out there. The Kuykendalls, the Prices, the McKays, 3 families, 4 months of terror, and not a single answer. The calls stopped, but the fear never truly left. They moved on with their lives, but the question still lingers: why them? Who was behind it? And more importantly, could it happen again? Technology has advanced since 2007. Phones are smarter, cameras are everywhere. Everything we do is connected. And with every new advancement, new vulnerabilities emerge. The idea of someone hijacking your phone, listening to your conversations, watching you, no longer seems like science fiction. It's real, and it's easier than ever. So ask yourself this: How much do you really trust the device in your pocket? What would you do if your own phone turned against you? Stay safe and always be aware of what's happening around you.